things. This is available on the site. So I took your feedback, really simple, but probably still fairly.
Too much for
So
me
we have the introduction and basic, just what it is, that's it. And then the next page, the sample letter.
Okay.
So that's, you can use this or not. Here's some talking points. And the class is that.
Oh.
And it's got links to some videos. And that's what I want to go through is that class. The next, it won't be, the first one we're doing on October 7th, and that's the Obsidian Knives up in Richmond. And
I will be sending out an email.
yeah, if you guys want to do a knife, we need to know, because you can do, he said, arrowheads, you can just do for free, but if you want a knife, it's like $10.
The 7th is a
My
Saturday.
recommendation is if you're doing an arrowhead, you probably still should give him a couple bucks anyway for doing it. And bringing the obsidian and whatnot.
And if
So,
we're going to his place, correct?
yes, it will be in Richmond.
No, I have been there. I went with the Widow Widowers. He has a great place for tossing knives and arrows, and he is so informative
Yeah,
and very
I've heard some
giving,
really good things about it.
very giving about his knowledge.
Yeah. But do you think we could say, here's a letter, come over, and we're gonna click these links and watch them?
Yeah.
That's easy, right?
Yeah.
And then I did add one other part, because this part, these videos basically say, okay, you're done. In a year, meet again and we'll
A
review,
year.
which is fine for that portion. But then I added another portion that you could read that says, thank you for coming. If we would like to extend this and learn some more things, we could do that as a group. And then that goes beyond what this is.
So are the videos we're watching one at a time, or are we watching all of them in one sitting?
So that's what we'll do in October,
Watch
second
it.
October. I'll go through what it is. And I'll walk through videos, we'll have it up here, we'll watch the videos, we'll talk about it, and we'll kind of explain, like, but, we kind of almost pretend we're at a neighborhood group. Now, after I created this, and this is where I could use a little bit of feedback. I went to the Weston Fair, very good, by the way, so thank you guys for being there. So we had a couple of people in our group that were there. Don, did communications. You guys were there doing their class. We got a tour of it downloaded. Can't get the last half hour of it. I'm like, oh,
It's getting better.
I'm close.
Did we record it? For our record?
No,
It's so different.
of the first one, I got an hour of it downloaded. I had to crop it into pieces and download it off my phone. But the last half hours.
What time on the 7th? It says 10 to 2. It's on
Yes.
the email I sent about upcoming events. and all
At 10 o'clock in the morning. That's a Saturday. So,
Is that something I can send out to my big email? or-
absolutely.
Yes?
Yeah. Now, the other part of that neighborhood group is this packet. And so if we do this, you would print out these packets, and it doesn't have to be in color, but you can, I think the last page really would do well in color. But, and this packet was mostly created by a group in Washington called Map Your Neighborhood. And it just goes through introduction, emergency preparedness, and then 9 steps. So whenever you have and it'll go through this, but when you have a disaster, you grab this and say, what do I do? Okay, you take care of your loved ones first. Okay, make sure my loved ones are okay. What do I do next? Add protective gear. The reason you do that is because in an emergency, your thinking will not be the same as you would normally. She was like, we got the 9 steps memorized. I don't need this. I still might need it. And so you put this, and it'll go through how to store it and whatnot. And so you got by yourself, 6 steps, with your neighbors, 3 steps, something like that. And the videos go through that, and they'll say, what about gathering, and equipment, verifying equipment, doing your map of your area, the grid line map, who the people in my area are, and the health card.
Do you do
So-
like, okay, so the people across the street are in the second ward, in
Mhm.
the first ward. But I wouldn't mind being with, the Merritts across the street,
Because you can look out your window.
and I can
those
see them,
people.
and the people behind me, it's farther to run to them, all that stuff, because they're sometimes at work.
It's just, out there, dotted line. Right down the middle of.
You know, here's the thing. You can do whatever you want. But let me go over what so at Weston, that was talking to Don, he's like, well, North Logan has this program called the River Swamp Program, I don't remember. They sent it to me and got it like this morning. So I've been going through it. Part of it's harder, and so I'm trying to think how this would fit in. But he says he doesn't want to do it as small as, like, these were kind of, you divide your group in blocks. My thinking is, I can't help right immediately at the disaster. I'm not going to run over and say, oh, let's help somebody across, 4 or 5 blocks away. I need to, and so I'm thinking we need to help and then expand to the church for the ward, and then expand it out, and keep going out like that. But they've come out with a lot of stuff, and I want to make sure that we try to follow existing structures that are in the valley as much as we can. So I'm going to look at that and see if I can incorporate some of that into it. So you're welcome to look at it, but by the second meeting in October,
Is that the 26th?
is that the 4th Thursday? Then yes. Then on the 26th, we'll go over it, watch the videos, and I should have some updates. They have some good points in their program that I don't have in this. This one's mainly for the very, very small block, 20 groups, and then expand out the church. And then I don't have anything. They're talking about the bigger one. They're saying when you get to the church, and they're completely skipping this entirely. They're saying immediately go to the church, and we'll send you out to do the verifications from there. The good part of what they're teaching is that you don't have to get any of the members ready. You just tell them when you come to church, and we'll tell you what to do. I don't know if I like that. I would
Depends
rather.
on how far away you live from the church.
Well, I would rather say, here's the plan, do this if you can, and then whatever doesn't happen, then we'll take care of the church. But at least get them started. At least say, here's 6 steps that you do before you even go somewhere. It's like, that part I think is
You
missing.
have to be able to get out your door.
Yeah, it's like, what do you do before you even get out the door? Now, I could change the 7th, 8th, and 9th steps to say, now instead of meeting at the block, meeting. So I've got to look at that, but you have to have the, what do you do before you even get out the door step? What do you do for yourself and things like that? So I've got I like their program, and I like this program, but I think there's a middle ground somewhere.
Because everyone has to have their sign put out when the people come around to check on them.
Right. I mean, you want to have something like this. Now, people will only have red and green. But once you actually go out, the other program has also yellow, which means we couldn't find anybody there type of thing. We didn't go in the house, but we didn't.
Nobody answered.
They didn't say they were okay. Nobody answered at all. So I get that. So
Just caution.
it's more of,
Cautionary.
you've got to check them later.
Unknown.
But we checked them. They didn't say they were okay, and they didn't say they were hurt. They just weren't there. Somebody will need to go check their home later.
So it's kind of like a triage. You're triaging how fast.
Oh yeah, it's definitely built. Sandy Spenlove is kind of helping run it, and she's obviously been in service. Got a lot of cert in it, which I like. That part I like. But there's a lot of forms, a lot of things. I'm like, okay, how are we gonna make this easy? Because, and their idea is you have a book, and then everybody works off that book. I'm like, what if that book is in that house that just fell down?
Well, it's supposed to say, if it's the same program for
Yeah.
what I attended, then if a guy in Florida did hurricane after hurricane.
Yeah, I think it is
program.
related in Florida, yes.
And so I received the training on it, so I can understand how it works, but it's
Yeah.
supposed to stay at the church building. But yeah,
Well, the church falls down.
where, and you have a key to get into the
Right.
church, you know.
So,
yeah.
in a disaster, we have to sit there at the church until somebody who has a key finally comes to the door. So that I see as a negative, whereas this, everybody has got. It's like, whoever shows up, that's who is running it.
So
So,
that's kind of like CERT. The first one there kind of helps.
yeah, there's parts of CERT that I don't like either. This first one, they're being in charge, I'm like, okay. They've got,
You're better the ones like, I'm not going first.
I'm
I'm
like, well, if you're the first one there and then the person who knows more shows up, it's like, my feeling is you become an assistant to that person.
Defer to the more knowledgeable one, but hopefully not too bossy.
Yeah. By the way, who wants these? Okay, anybody? Okay. All right.
Thanks for your subscription.
You're welcome. And I just finished a batch of ice cream.
Wow.
And interestingly enough, the regular, just normal ones came out just fine. So,
The little tacos, is that what they are?
Yep.
Castros.
yeah, but when I did the pink ones, they swell up. And I had to wash my feet because it's like, it'll literally pull
Oh,
out.
no, this.
So, here, I'll pass it that way, you can pass them
I'm
around.
glad that you got a great.
But this one's very, very airy, and this one's very, very damp, like more damp, so it's still. And so, it's kind of fun. However, this one tastes better.
Oh.
It's got a little bit more flavor to it.
That fat way is really good.
I actually already did one batch for one of the members in our group. If you guys want, I can, I'm happy to do that as well. So, I usually do like you bring the food frozen, ready to put in, and I'll do it and we'll split the in from that. I'll pay for the electricity, the bags, the time, all that kind of stuff. You pay for the food, you split the results 50/50. Well, if you keep passing that around, because if it's not eaten, you'll look bad eventually. Although if we're not going to eat them, do close it. That'll let it for a week. Then, so. All right. With that, actually, where's Bentley?
Maybe going to the bathroom?
Hey,
We're teaching our
tell Bentley gets back.
class again on the 10th at my house. So I don't know if you want to send that out to anybody that hasn't been to a sanitation class yet.
Yeah.
That wants to do it. So, do we take, and we're having potluck after?
It's a day class.
10 a.m. on what day?
The 10th, October 10th.
That's
Until like
the
10,
10
Tuesday.
to noon,
and then lunch.
and we're having a potluck lunch.
Potluck.
Tuesday.
Mhm.
Maybe Tuesday.
Okay.
I'll write it up and make sure you.
We've been doing fermentation classes, but they also want to do our binding. Well, the class part 2 is right after this, so we're gonna do our.
You're gonna come up an intro?
Our sanitation class, then we're having a potluck lunch, and then we're starting again.
All right.
One or whatever.
Don't trip on any cords, okay? then.
Well, with that, I'm going to turn the time over to Becky.
All right, welcome to this evening's Cache Valley Ready class. My name's Bentley Miles. I'm just introducing tonight's presenter, who happens to be my mother, so be nice, or I'll come for you. Terry Miles graduated with an associate degree in nursing from BYU in 1982, thus fulfilling a lifelong dream that started with the children's book Nurse Nancy. She worked as a registered nurse in home health and in various departments at various hospitals until 1988, when she quit working as a nurse in order to be a better mom. By the way, I was born in 1988, so I'm the reason she wanted to be a better mom. However, she maintained her nursing license through continuing education until 2019. She has made herself available 24/7 and has taken many a call in the wee hours to help family and friends with medical questions at all hours of the day or night. Mostly questions posed by her children. So,
But not all.
but not all. So let's give a hand to Terry.
Okay, so, yeah, go ahead and turn off the light. So the right switch over there, the one on the right. Okay, the right, that one. Okay, then you can see this better. So this is supposed to be basics. And so, I don't know, when we talk about things like taking care of scratches and scrapes and bruises, I feel like those are not life-threatening. Who cares? So we're going to go a little deeper than that, but not too much. So one of the things that is that in the class, okay, it was a 10-hour course that I used as my guide here, and they pointed out that it's invaluable. You can use it throughout your entire life. There will be times when you will have opportunities to use your skills, but that it is a perishable skill. In other words, you have to review, you have to keep up. Things change, you forget, you get old, and you get out of practice. So it's not like a one and done type of thing. So what in your mind is first aid? Go ahead.
I was gonna say, you're the first one to render aid.
Okay, so the first one on the scene of an accident or illness. Okay, good. Anything else? It's what you do first. Okay, so you fill a gap between the injury or the illness and when they can get professional medical care. That may be very short, or it could be really long. Like if you're off at Lake Powell and you have an accident or whatever, and it takes hours to get to where there's treatment or for someone to get to you, it could be very significant. And so significantly different.
Did you have an experience with that?
No, Roseanne did.
I got my son 10 hours after he was in a horrible accident.
Oh.
And he had, like 50 stitches in his face.
Yeah, his face was practically torn
His
off,
eyelid was torn off.
but it was in a place where they had to take him by boat and then by car and then by ambulance, I believe, after that. So, I mean, it can be very long.
We were at Lake Powell on a houseboat, and my brother was out on a boat, and his daughter got thrown up in the air on one of the tubes and came down, and really had a problem and actually had a seizure. But it was that same night that started a storm that actually sunk like 3 boats, and we were stuck. We couldn't go anywhere. We had to stay there all night, and so we just used priesthood says we'll give her a blessing, and that's all we're going to be able to do. And then, we'll wait until the storm's done.
Yeah, you do what you can, and
Yeah.
and having some knowledge and some skill and some supplies can be the difference between life and death. So you're trying to prevent serious infection or serious blood loss, as well as hopefully save a life or possibly a limb or some body parts or whatever. So our goals to begin with are to protect the person from further harm, to manage life-threatening emergencies. The number one is, okay, you think of it in order, like if your blood circulates oxygen, okay? So if there's no oxygen, why circulate the blood? Okay, so you've got to do breathing first, circulation second, and stopping then bleeding so that there's enough to keep going, then treating for shock. In the meantime, while you wait to get to help. One of the first things you're going to do after you make sure that those 3 basics are at least started is to call for help, so that you don't end up, or start moving towards help, so that you don't end up having to do it all yourself for hours and hours on end. And you can either do it yourself, or if there's someone else around, hopefully you're not the only one, but sometimes you are. So you can ask for help from somebody else. I hadn't even thought of this, but like in a car wreck or something, think about your own safety as well. Don't just jump in, you have to approach in a direction and in a way that you're not going to double or triple and become one of the victims or one of the patients. Another one that in some ways to me doesn't really matter, but it really should, and that is to consider that all bodily fluids are infected, and so you want to do all you can to protect yourself with gloves, a mask. If you don't have a mask, you can tie a t-shirt over your face or whatever, eye protection if you can, and to wash your hands before and after to prevent spread of whatever might be included.
But I don't carry gloves.
No, I don't
When
either.
there's a head that has to get held together, because I was the first one on the scene of an accident, I just reached through the window and held
Yep.
it together.
Yep,
Cool.
and that's what I would do.
I do have small trauma kits that I try to carry with me. Part of the reason I have gloves is because a lot of major accident scenes have a lot of other traumatized individual material going around. So people poop themselves when they get in major accidents sometimes. So if nothing else, you can try to handle one thing, strip them off, and then start handling something else and not get a
Not
mess.
contaminate and
Not
spread it
contaminate
around.
a wound.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay, and these are guidelines for consent. You should introduce yourself and ask if they want help. Okay? An adult has the right to say, no, thank you, let me die. And or whatever, and you don't help someone who does not want help. If the person is unconscious legally, it's implied that they have consented. Okay, so legally you're not liable. Okay, the Good Samaritan thing helps to protect you. If they're under 18, you should ask a parent if they're present, if they want you to help, if it's okay. If they say yes, go ahead. And then the last thing, even if someone's unconscious, talk to them. Any ideas why?
Hearing is the last skill before you die.
many, many, many people are conscious enough to hear you even when they cannot react in any way. Okay? So it's soothing, it's comforting, it reassures them, as well as a lot of other things. I mean, even the people around you or whatever, they can participate and help in their minds, even if their bodies cannot react.
On the accepting help, it's kind of hard to believe, but one of my colleagues at work had a heart attack on an airplane, passed out, and did CPR, and he revived him, and he was mad. He was just done.
But did you have a posted do not revive order, do not resuscitate, or whatever that's called?
DNR.
I don't know that anybody looked. DNR. If there was.
You might want a medical bracelet if it's that important to you.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep,
Yeah.
or I think something around your neck. Tattoo.
And horrible for the people who tried to care for him, that he was dead.
Yeah, no kidding.
Buddy, I just saved your life. And it wasn't pleasant.
Okay, so you're gonna assess, especially if you just happen upon a scene, what's going on. If they're talking, that's good. If they're unresponsive or unconscious, that's obviously bad. This is the best way to check for breathing, which is the number one thing we said, that to make sure that there's oxygen going, so breathing. If you put your head down like that next to somebody and look at their chest, your face is closed and you can feel on your cheek if there's breathing. You can hear with your ear and you can watch to see if the chest is rising and falling. A lot of times, it's just the tongue. If they're not breathing, the tongue in the back of their throat, that's the problem. And so you can adjust, tip their chin up just a little bit and put a little bit of pressure on their forehead just to tip the head just a little bit. And often that will open the airway and then they will start to breathe. There's a new thing, I can't even remember what it's called, but it's basically CPR without respirations. And it's supposedly, well, it's safer for the person who's giving it, because you don't want to put your mouth on their mouth. So apparently there is a thing now where all you do is tip their head back and give compressions to the chest. I was in ICU one time when a guy, he was on heart monitor and his heart stopped, and the nurse just went like this and pounded him with her fist, and he started back up. And that was all it took. So, I mean, sometimes you can get them started again with simple things like tipping the head back or a slug to the chest. So, okay, then to look for obvious signs of bleeding. A lot of times you can see it, sometimes you can't, but especially if they have a coat or things like that on that are covering them, look inside, see if there's something that you can't see on the outside. Check for puddles. You can put your hand underneath the body. You might find different kinds of puddles besides blood if you do that. So you might want to look instead of feel. But watch for bleeding. So if you have protection, put it on. If you don't, it's your choice whether you want to do something about it or not. After bleeding stops, dressings need to be left in place. Don't peel them back to check because you'll often start the bleeding up again. If you have something you can tie a dressing on with, it helps to have the dressing be kind of a wad so that when you tie it on, it puts more pressure there than around the rest of the strap or whatever you're using. And then check periodically, making sure that it's not too tight and that the bleeding isn't continuing. I think there's a slide later about checking to see if it's not too tight. So okay, here's the wad. I'm getting ahead of myself. So you can bundle up just a t-shirt, a napkin, a diaper, anything, and then tie it with a belt, a t-shirt, almost anything that you have, except be careful. If you think thin things like a rope is going to cause problems. So you can keep your pressure on with your own hand. Hopefully, if you don't have too many places. This came from a scout presentation, and so obviously they have their little triangle bandanas that you can use to tie it on.
I want to ask this because I'm
Okay.
The last first aid class I was in, they said that it's now changed for any bleeding on your arms or legs, your extremities. The first thing you do is put on a tourniquet. Now, if it's just light, it's just a bandage. But if it's at all squirting,
Arterial.
the very first thing you do is you tourniquet. They say they found that in almost every case, you just take it off and they're totally fine. So that was my last first aid class. They said that's new. So I know this. So I don't know if anybody else has heard that or how new that is. But it was surprising to me that they're like, if it's on obviously you can't do that on the body or the neck.
Right.
For the head.
With the speed at which the majority of cases are getting to hospitals so that they can remove tourniquets, I have also heard that they are encouraging the use of tourniquets because the number of lives that it will save goes up a lot.
Obviously, if it's just oozing a little bit, that's
Yeah.
different. We're
Or
talking squirting.
Even if it's razor blade or something, and you can put pressure on it and it stops. But the kind that's squirting or whatever is not going to be stopped by that. And really, what you ask yourself is their life or their limb. Okay, if they're going to lose their life, if you don't tourniquet it, then you should tourniquet it.
Well, just for a point of reference, say a knee surgery where they do a knee replacement, that person's legs in a tourniquet for a couple of hours, and they're fine. So
Right.
just know how to put them on.
Yeah, and that's
In
the
practice.
challenge there. Okay, so here it's showing to check circulation. If you press on your own skin and then let go, you'll see a light spot, and then within about 2 seconds, it fills back up with color, making you pink again. And that's what you do outside of or past the dressing, is check and make sure that it gets blood flow back to it. If not, you're probably too tight and you're tourniqueting. And if you don't need a tourniquet, loosen it up, okay? If you're just trying to hold the dressing on there.
There's your tourniquet guy.
Yeah, there you go. So when blood is squirting,
Needs a couple of.
when they've lost a limb, just, big puddles or whatever, then yeah, you're going to go for a tourniquet. And we're not going to go into how to do tourniquets. I actually have never really used one. I'm not an expert at all in it, and it's too complex for an intro class.
They're actually available online, walmart.com. Just make sure you get the CAT type, and they're not very expensive, and they're very easy to apply.
You get the what?
CAT, C-A-T, Combat Application Tourniquet.
Okay, this is not advancing.
Did it quit again?
Yeah, it's not going. Oh, I've got maybe
Yeah,
something
fine.
else I brought up. Let me try that now. There we go. I had accidentally touched something else. Okay.
You try them a couple times, because some of those $3-4.
Okay, and like he mentioned, you should not apply tourniquets to anything that's not a limb, an extremity, okay? Obviously, to the neck, the head, and the body, you should never apply a tourniquet. Okay, now we're going to talk about shock. How do you decide if somebody needs to be treated for shock?
You don't. You always treat them for shock.
Okay, why is that?
If they've been in an accident or been in a situation like that, either they have it or they might get it. And if you treat them for shock right away, then yeah.
Yep, you're right. So you treat everybody because trauma is almost always going to result in some degree of shock. Okay, so this helps to understand what shock actually is. You've got a certain amount of blood, and you've got a system where the blood goes through the blood vessels to the heart and then to the vital organs, including the brain. When you are in shock, you either have fluid loss because of bleeding, or your container, which is your blood vessels, expand, and then there isn't enough to fill the space. Okay, so then gravity is going to take if you only have half as much as you need, it's going to fill your bottom half and not your top half, and so all the important stuff is going to be missing blood.
I also recommend treating yourself for shock, because I hurt myself pretty good, but didn't want anyone to be concerned about me. So I got up, pretended everything was fine. Then I passed out in front of my son and traumatized him.
Gotcha.
I had 2 falls.
Okay, that's a good point. Okay, to take care of yourself as well. Okay, so this is hypovolemic, low volume, okay, is what causes shock. Okay, now, like I said, it doesn't have to be that you've lost blood. Okay, it can be for other reasons. But when your body doesn't have enough blood to circulate, then your body tissues aren't, including the brain, are not getting enough oxygen, and it can be life-threatening. It is life-threatening. Okay, so some of the things that can cause, these are some of the main ones: internal bleeding, heart attack, a severe allergic reaction, severe illness or infection, or a chest injury, but they are not the only ones. Trauma, even like if you're in a wreck and you are not injured, just the trauma, this being scared, you hyperventilate and you get sweaty and clammy and shaky and whatnot, and that can, your blood vessels expand and your blood will drain to the lower part of your body. Okay, so signs of shock: restless and irritable, feeling weak, confused, afraid, often dizzy, sweaty, cold or pale, and even, I mean, you're sweaty, but you're still chilly, you still feel cold. Your pulse can be weak. People get nauseated or vomit sometimes. Breathing can be a problem. And then thirst. And part of the reason I believe for the thirst is that your blood isn't circulating throughout your whole body, and
Everybody knows it needs more fluid.
yep, needs more.
So a question, I think I'm answering it. So when I was about 12 or 13, I went to visit a friend at her home, which is really nothing more than a small trailer.
Okay.
And she was a niece of living with her aunt and uncle, who are very, very poor. and they got in an argument and were wrestling with a knife. And I'd never seen anything like this. Everything in my body went cold.
Yeah.
Because I was in shock that I was seeing something I never had seen before. So that is an example of fear
Yep.
Creating shock.
Right.
You shunted. All the blood went to your core in preparation to get stabbed in a limb.
That was the first time I scared me to death.
So that's a good example of a trauma.
My buddy Mike says you're describing work,
Describing work.
being at work.
I don't know that at all. It would be a first for me too.
Okay, so like Troy said, you treat people for shock even before it looks like they're in shock. Okay? Lie down, or at least sit down. If they're turning pale and whatnot, or have actual signs, put their feet up so that the blood runs down to their head and their torso. You'll want to watch and make sure that they can still breathe and get help, because it could be life-threatening. Okay? Did I see a hand? No. Okay. All right. This is what I kind of didn't want to cover, but minor injuries, we're so used to that minor things never are big ever, but that's because we have antibiotics and things like that. So if you don't treat minor stuff, sometimes it can spread. It can become a big deal. I treated a patient in home health. It was just a kid that got a cut, and it got infected, and he ended up with septicemia and had the infection going through his whole body, and it almost killed him, and it was very minor.
There was a lady that you were aware of, I think she was another nurse or something.
Yeah, Katie Whittle's friend.
Yeah, who was working in her garden with a cut on her finger and ended up with septicemia, and she lost her finger, and then she lost her hand, and then she lost her arm, and then she died.
Yeah, they cut off her finger, then her hand, then her arm, and she still passed away from a cut on her finger.
Because of some infection.
Yeah.
She got from the soil.
From the soil, from her garden. Yeah, and it was like not very long, 4, 5, 6 days, where it went boom, 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 and gone. So it still happens, even with modern medicine. So wash, apply antibiotic, and cover it. Okay, bruising, obviously too, is, generally not a big deal. You can sometimes have a blood vessel that just keeps leaking, and an area can fill up more and more with blood, and internal bleeding, where it's not blood running out on the ground or whatever, but you can be losing volume in your circulatory system and cause problems. And also, these pictures show what is likely a broken bone. Bruising does happen because of a break. So that would be something to be aware of. Okay, puncture wounds. Usually we just pull out slivers with tweezers or whatever. Fish hooks, if a fish hook has gone in and not out the other side, because it's got that barb on it, you can't pull it back. And so you've got to keep shoving it in until the barb comes out. Cut it off with like wire cutters and then back it out. But if you have something big, like somebody falls on a rebar stake or something like that, you leave the item in place, because it's putting pressure on whatever it's punctured through and stopping bleeding. If you pull it out, you might open up some major wound to bleed. At Camp Hunt, we had a guy, one of the scout leaders, fell on a stake, tent stake, and it stabbed through the back of his calf. And they had to pull the stake out and just take him to the hospital. Oh, what did you do, Bentley?
It's the one time when we broke the rule, because we couldn't
Get him off.
We couldn't get the rebar out, and we couldn't cut the rebar, we didn't have the right tools. And so we did end up pulling his leg slowly off the rebar, and then we tourniqueted it first and then pulled it off and packed with gauze and rushed him down. So
Years ago, a construction worker on the expansion of the BYU Stadium fell on rebar and it ran right through his body. And they cut the rebar off and
Hauled him in.
Mhm.
Fun,
he
fun.
was lucky it was a construction site. They've got stuff to cut rebar.
Get rebar off. Okay. All right. Bites, ticks. I mean, to me, this is not life-threatening, but it still can be. There are diseases, Lyme disease and whatnot, that you can get from ticks.
And I've got kids who carry EpiPens,
Yep. For tick bites?
stings,
For stings, okay.
these stings.
Yeah. All right, so the best way to get a tick out is to take some tweezers and grab down low, because if you grab up here, they'll just break off and leave the mouth inside you. But very gently pull them out. And
My grandma used kerosene. You just get a cotton ball and just put it on the,
if the tick is alive,
if it's alive.
then they'll back out when you put stuff on them that they don't like. But sometimes they're dead.
All the YouTube videos that tell you gotta twist clockwise are bull crap. No, you don't twist either direction.
If you twist, you break the head off.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know that we have copperheads and cottonmouths around here, but I do know we have
Diamondback.
rattlesnakes. So I thought these were pretty interesting, what the bite marks look like and how much swelling can happen. We knew of, heard the story of some kids in our ward where one of them picked up a baby rattlesnake.
They were
hiking with
They were
this-
hiking up the mountain over there behind Hillcrest Elementary, where I don't know if they still have the big microwave reflectors up there. There was a scout group and they were hiking up the mountain.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Anyway, so one of them picked it up and got bit, dropped it. So then the next one picked it up and got bit and dropped it. And the third one picked it up, 3 kids bit by the same snake. Can you imagine being the scout leader and having 3 rattlesnake bite kids in your group? But each bite was less venom than the one before. And so one was really sick, one was medium sick, and one was barely affected. So anyway, to deal with snake bites, they are very painful. There's a lot of swelling, discoloration, and shock is a very real possibility. So you need to get the victim to a hospital as soon as possible. Immediately, I think the picture before I picked one. Okay, I see where the ring was. If you let that swelling get going before you take the ring or the watch or whatever off, they may have to cut it off, or it could strangle that finger. So as quick as anything like that happens, take stuff off so that swelling is not going to cause issues. You want them to lie down and not pump their blood, get the venom circulating in their body, and let gravity keep the venom in whatever body part it's in, so you let it be below the rest of the body. So if it's an arm or leg, whatever, that should be downhill, not up, because you don't want to drain it into the rest of you.
And then you treat for shock and put their legs up.
No, I mean, in that case, no, you're not going to do that. But okay, sprains and strains, generally these are not life-threatening. Take weight off and assume that there may be a break. You can't really tell usually the difference. Ice, rest, an elastic bandage or ACE wrap, what do they call those nowadays?
They still call it ACE
Do
wrap.
they? Okay. And elevate the injured area so that the blood flows out of it and it doesn't collect. Any questions? I feel like I'm just rattling. Okay, dislocations. This bone is actually pushed back. So when the elbow sticks out further like that, instead of, usually there's kind of some dents and whatnot. That's a sign of that elbow dislocation. This is where the kneecap is off on the side. They recommend that you not try to put it back in place. And it's very painful. Usually there's pinched nerves. Bentley's having issues.
I've dislocated my shoulder like 20 times now.
So there's also, like you said, the future instability that once you've done it once, it's a lot easier for it to happen again and again. But it usually there's nerve pinching and your blood vessels have been pinched off and stuff. So it's extremely painful and I wouldn't say life-threatening unless you're in shock, but not a good thing. So the sooner you get treatment, the better, so that there isn't permanent damage from the lack of blood flow and from the pinched nerves. Bentley, you relocate your own shoulder. How do you do that?
Experience. I did learn how, and the very first time I did it, I was able to get it back in, and the guys up at Beaver Ski Resort were like, "Whoa, that's so cool!" So, how? Should we teach people how to do it? If you're going to say don't try to relocate it without proper training?
Probably not.
Okay,
No,
let's skip it.
That's not a 101.
Yeah. All right.
That's good to know.
Broken bones. So you look for deformity, the bruising. If there are open wounds, like in this one, there was a homeschool group recently where a kid fell out of a tree and I wasn't there, it was my daughter that did the rescue there, but I think it was his leg that broke and was stabbed into the dirt. And it was so filthy, it was just unbelievable. But, so, you're gonna want to not move them as much as possible and stabilize, because you don't want it wiggling around and whatnot. Either take them to the hospital yourself or call 911 for an ambulance, depending on how bad it is. Usually when it's an open fracture, then you have a huge risk of infection.
My son fell off the slide. He did it twice in 1 year from both arms 3 months apart on slides. But we had magazines in the car and we folded those up
And
to,
splinted.
yeah, to kind of splint it, just to serve as some kind of a
Stabilizer.
stabilizer.
Nice. Yeah, there's lots of things you can use. Sticks and newspaper and magazines, or a binder, a backpack. Almost anything will help to stabilize it. Even if all you did was like take the kid's backpack and have him hold it and set his arm on it or something like that, just so that it's not flopping around, getting worse or getting, poking through the flesh. Let's see. I like this. Don't do this when moving a victim. You don't want to turn a regular fracture into a compound fracture.
Those SAM splints are getting very reasonably priced. Just their thin foam padding over a piece of sheet metal that's flexible, and you unroll it, you wrap it around, and then you ACE wrap it, and it's a really, really, really effective splint. And
Right.
they pack down to smaller than a Gatorade bottle
Wow,
to carry around with you for splinting.
cool. Well, and back in the day, newspaper it doesn't even take very many layers to wrap something and make it so you can't bend your arm. But who has even
I was
newspaper
like,
nowadays?
what's that?
Yeah. So, but a
Jump
cardboard
man.
box could do it.
We'll go to Troy's house and get his magazines.
I give
Well,
them away all the time.
everybody's got cardboard boxes now from Amazon. right?
Amazon, yeah.
Yeah.
Not me, I can't afford Amazon.
Okay, so the goal of splinting is to reduce further damage. It's good to pad it well, especially as it swells and is uncomfortable. If you don't have padding, just do it anyway. It'll still save a lot of grief. We're not going to go into all the ways to splint, but you can take a quick look at these pictures. This obviously is back to the Scout thing. This, how you would do a shoulder, like Bentley with his dislocated shoulder. You use one to hold it up and another one to hold it against the body. Elbow. Okay, head, neck, and back injuries. So your vertebrae do a really, really good job of protecting your spinal cord. The problem is when they're cracked or broken, then you are at very high risk of like paralysis or death even. So that's when you need to be really careful about whether or not you move somebody who has a problem that might be with their neck or back or whatever. A lot of them do not have pain. Okay? So if they can't move themselves, if they can't move their feet or whatever, or there's a risk like from a fall from a significant height or whatever, you pretty much need to assume that there is a possible back or neck injury and don't move them.
The rule of thumb in lifeguard training
Mm-hmm.
is if you didn't see it happen until you verify with someone who is conscious, every injury is treated as a spinal
Interesting.
because you don't know.
Yeah, if they can't tell you what happened, and even if they can tell you that they're not in pain, that doesn't mean that they're okay and that there is not a spine injury. Usually head injuries, the people are confused or disoriented or whatever, and some can be really ornery. Okay, here's Bentley's, basically almost anybody you can assume, but vehicle accidents, fall, if their helmet that they were wearing is broken, there's a good sign, or there's a possibility. If they're complaining of back or neck pain, if they have tingling in fingers or toes, if they act confused or they talk like they're drunk, slurred speech and stuff like that, they may not be drunk. When Bentley had a brain infection, his speech got so slow and so slurred, he really seriously sounded like he was about to pass out from drinking too much. So you want to stabilize them, especially their neck and back, stop bleeding or whatever. Okay, and then this one, unless threatened by immediate danger, such as a fire or they're out in the middle of the highway or whatever, that's one of those times where you have to decide, is it better to risk moving them and have them be paralyzed or letting them get run over again and be killed? I mean, and you have to make that kind of a choice sometimes. If they're having trouble breathing, they say go ahead and do the slight neck adjustment. Even if that's going to possibly snap their spinal cord. It probably won't because spinal cords are pretty tough. But if they can't breathe, they're dead anyway. So you just as well take the risk and tip their head up so they can breathe.
My cousin's husband went off the side of Teton Pass in his sports car and went down the side of the mountain. And most people stood at the top and thought, oh, he's dead. There's no point in going down. But some people went down and were able to like hold his head in a position so he could breathe until they got help.
Yeah.
He survived.
Now see, if they had not gone down there, he would have died. So something that simple can save a life, just positioning their head so they can breathe. Okay. Stabilize. Okay, if the victim has to be moved, you need to, there's various ways, but you can have multiple people and try to go, 1, 2, 3, lift and try to do it all together. You can slide them on something like a piece of carpet. You could scoot them over onto a blanket and slide them.
I've been carried on a door.
On a door, there you go. Take the hinges off the door. One of these tables would work.
They couldn't bring me back in though because the door was bigger than the opening.
Yeah. Tip you to get you in. Good. Okay. Okay, so the times when you move a victim, even if you might cause more damage, is in a fire or smoke situation where they're not going to be able to breathe. A drowning situation, you can't leave them under the water, obviously. Electrical or poison gas hazard or exposure to something like that, or other immediate danger, like they're in the middle of the freeway, get them off. Otherwise, they're going to be dead anyway. At least you have the chance if you can get them out of that dangerous spot. Okay. It is 8 o'clock. Go. What?
The video about when the motorcyclist was stuck underneath the car up by USU, and there was a fire on the car, and so they had to get him out. So they pushed the car up, pulled him out, and then up to there on the side.
Yeah. Yep. That's a perfect example of a situation where if you leave them, they're going to die. If you move them, they might die, but at least they have a chance. Yes.
So the poison gas one, kind of going back to the rattlesnake thing, there was a whole family down in, I don't remember if it was Fillmore, Beaver. One guy went down into a silage pit. There's gases. He collapsed. Somebody climbed down to get him. He collapsed. Another guy climbed down to get him. So I think it took out 2 or else 3 members of the family and one of their employees. So.
And they all died?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So.
Similar story where it's kind of funny. It was a CERT video, I think, discussing the importance of communication, but it applies in this too, where there was a farmer laying in the middle of the road, unconscious, and a police officer was the first one to show up and hadn't heard from the fire department, and they knew that his tractor was leaking ammonia. And so the cop pulls up, and you get to watch the whole dash cam and listen to the cop's audio.
Yep.
And he runs up, and the moment he gets out of his car, he starts coughing a little bit and talking on the radio. And he goes over and grabs the farmer and pulls for a second, and then stops to cough a couple more times. Eventually goes down to his hands and knees and just collapses, and they both died. And the fire department knew that you couldn't approach the victim. So there are plenty of situations where you won't save anybody if you're not careful.
Electrical hazards. There's dozens of videos where a car's taken out a power pole and somebody's walked up and they walked right into the power lines. And
Yeah.
so always be aware of what you're getting yourself into.
Yep.
Before you jump in.
And it would be very, very easy to do because you want to help. I think that would be one of the hardest situations ever, to stand back and not do anything. But it's better to lose one than to just keep adding to body count. Okay, we're about halfway through this. We won't make it to the end, I don't think.
Nope.
So I think we will call that
Back in
Part
2 weeks
A.
and do part 2.
We good?
Yep.
You want me to keep plowing a little?
Nope. Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry we had so much commenting.
Oh, no.
You know what, I'm surprised you got as far as you did. You guys know a lot, and like I said to them,